Ugh, I give up. I just don't think I'm going to be able to complete Decay of Logos. I've spent the last 2 weeks trying my hardest to fight my way to the end in order to give you a review, but there are simply too many technical problems standing in my way. Every time it feels like I've overcome and even squashed one of the numerous bugs, something even more game-breaking gets in the way and stops me dead in my tracks. And that's a shame, because there's a lot that I like about this debut release from Amplify Creations. But there's never a moment where you can just enjoy the cool and interesting elements the developer brings to the table, because this world is held together by duct tape and feels like it'll all come crashing down if you look at it wrong. Yeah, keep that in mind as I attempt to review the broken mess that is Decay of Logos. In its most reductive form, Decay of Logos is a cross between Dark Souls and Breath of the Wild. It's a game for people who want to get into the types of products that From Software makes, but don't like the punishing difficulty and dark, dreary world. It's a slightly more linear and straightforward adventure that scratches at the intrigue, mystery, and challenge of the Dark Souls games without fully committing. You play a young girl named Ada, who goes on an epic adventure after her village is burned to the ground. She, along with her mystical elk companion, manage to escape the destruction, but what they discover is a dangerous world filled with evil creatures and perilous paths. It's up to Ada to explore the strange world and help the friendly faces she runs into, all in an effort to get revenge on the people that destroyed her village. So, cliches aside, I immediately wanted to explore the world of Decay of Logos. It's bright, colorful, and filled with mysteries. One of the things that I learned about myself is that I love the sense of discovery that comes from being tossed into a strange world with little to no information. That's what happens here, so your only option is to investigate every path and overlook in an attempt to figure out where you're supposed to go and what you're expected to do. I like the sense of wonder that comes from putting the pieces together and learning the ins and outs of this fantasy world all on your own. Now, fans of this type of adventure game won't be all that surprised by Ada's journey. She quickly discovers that the open field hides cave entrances, mountain paths, and seemingly abandoned castles, all of which lead to different parts of the kingdom. By unlocking doors and starting up engines, Ada makes the interconnected world a lot more accessible for her and her friendly elk companion. And as she connects these paths and defeats the bosses, she'll uncover even bigger areas with new mysteries and characters to meet. This is all the stuff that I liked about Decay of Logos. I'm already a big fan of the Dark Souls franchise, so it didn't take much for me to get into what was supposed to be a slightly more accessible version. I like the quick combat, the colorful world, and that feeling you get when you remember that you don't have to run back and collect all your loot every time you die. All this should have led to a great alternative to the dark and depressing world you normally get from this type of game. But Decay of Logos is not a good alternative, at least not in its present state. I was initially concerned when the developer rushed out an email begging critics not to review the game before the Day 1 patch was released. That's inconvenient, but having seen how broken it was before launch, I was ready to give them the benefit of the doubt. Yeah, I shouldn't have, because the updated version feels just as buggy and broken as the previous version. This is the type of game where you quickly learn not to pause. Why, you may ask? It's because the frame rate chugs to single digits if you wait around too long. There were times when it took close to a minute for the game to slowly get back to the proper frame rate, which is always a little suspect. Of course, this is far from the worst problem in Decay of Logos, but it gives you a good idea of just how busted this game actually is. I ran into problems where I got stuck in the environment, fell through the floors, and had the game literally gobble up some of my best weapons. Decay of Logos also crashes all the time to the point where it turned my television off. I didn't even think that could happen. And don't forget that huge parts of the map will forget to load, making it impossible to safely travel through certain areas. Believe it or not, none of this was a deal breaker. Even when my TV turned off, I wasn't ready to give up on Ada's journey. But then I hit a point where the already questionable frame rate disintegrated into permanent slow motion. And not just for a minute or two, but until I turned off my PlayStation 4. And even when I logged back in, I still couldn't get through the section without it slowing down to 10% of the speed. This is where I gave up on the game for good. But look, even without the technical problems, there were signs that Decay of Logos had cut a lot of corners. The world is gorgeous and filled with mystery, but too often we end up walking through similar looking caves to uncover the exact same boss fight. And it's not just the bosses, but every enemy. It only takes an hour or two before you realize that everything about this game repeats. The setup hints at an epic adventure full of excitement, but what ends up happening is that you just do the same thing over and over and over. There's no variety here. And if I had to choose, I'm probably more frustrated by the squandered potential than the technical problems. Sure, the bugs ultimately kept me from completing the game, but based on the hours I put into Decay of Logos, I'm not so sure I'm missing out. And that's a shame, because there's so much about this game that I want to like. There's nothing I want more than to enjoy exploring the beautiful yet dangerous world and uncover its mysteries. But what awaits on the other side just isn't worth the trouble. Broken and banal, Decay of Logos is an absolute mess. What attempts to be a more colorful and accessible take on Dark Souls spirals out of control thanks to a complete lack of focus and cliched story. It's more monotonous than mysterious, offering an adventure riddled with repetitive bosses and predictable problems. And all that's before the awful, game-breaking bugs ruin everything. The technical difficulties aren't just a small annoyance because there are parts of this game that are nearly impossible to play in its current state. It's not that Decay of Logos is undercooked, but rather that somebody forgot to put it in the oven in the first place. Hey, thanks for watching our review. If you liked what you saw here, then you should know that we post new reviews and features almost every day. Now here's the question I have for you. What is the worst glitch or bug you've ever run into? Decay of Logos literally turning my TV off is a bad one, but these days there are a whole lot of horror stories. Let me see your picks in the comments below. In other news, we're in the middle of Review-mageddon. This is an especially busy month for reviews, so be on the lookout for Daymare 1998, Devil's Hunt, A Glider's Journey, In Between, and a whole bunch more. While you wait for that, I strongly recommend you click that subscribe button and support what we're doing here. Until then.